The night Germany realized the war was over was a night heavy with fear, confusion, and the quiet acceptance of a fate that everyone had seen coming, but no one wanted to face. The air of the collapsing German Reich was thick with smoke and cold wind as the last days of war dragged across ruined cities, broken roads, and shattered hopes. Soldiers, civilians, officers, and families all felt the same chilling certainty that the end had arrived and that nothing could stop what was unfolding before their eyes. In the dark shelters and dimly lit command rooms, the whispers traveled faster than orders. The war is lost. The war is finished. The Reich can no longer stand. These whispers carried a weight that no speech from any leader could match, because everyone knew that the truth had finally broken through the wall of propaganda and silence that had kept the nation moving for so long. Across the ruined capital, Berlin fires burned through the night as Soviet artillery shook the ground endlessly. Every explosion was like a countdown marking the final moments of a crumbling empire. German officers stared at the map of their nation with roads cut off, armies scattered, and fuel supplies nearly gone. They understood that the war machine, once feared across continents, had become nothing more than a cornered remnant fighting on broken tracks. In the bunkers beneath the capital, the sound of radios brought news from every front. None of it offered hope. The Western Allies had crossed the Rhine and rolled through German towns that had once been proud and orderly. The Eastern Front had collapsed like a wall of sand, and the Red Army was closing around Berlin with unstoppable force. There was no strategy left, no reserve division, no miracle weapon to change anything. Outside on the streets, the people felt the end coming. In every breath, mothers hurried their children into basements, praying that the bombs would spare them. One could hear footsteps echoing down destroyed alleyways as groups of refugees carried whatever they could find. Men who had once cheered for victory now searched for safe passages or simply sat by the ruins of their homes, staring at the fires in silence. Their belief in a final miracle had faded into nothing as the night deepened. The German soldiers, still holding their rifles in the shattered outskirts of Berlin, felt the hopeless weight on their shoulders. They were exhausted, starving, and surrounded. Their commanders had told them to fight to the last, but they could see the truth all around them. The war was no longer a battle for victory, but a battle for survival. Inside a cold bunker far beneath Berlin, Adolf Hitler sat in disbelief, refusing to accept what his generals were trying to tell him. His empire had collapsed, but he insisted that some last-minute counterattack could still change the course of history. His officers exchanged worried glances. They had been watching the situation crumble day after day, and now the last thin threads of hope had snapped. Even the most loyal among them knew the truth. Germany had lost the war, and the leader at the center of it all could no longer face reality. In the night, the senior generals gathered and spoke quietly. They knew there was no point in continuing the fight any longer. The armies in the field were surrounded, cut off, and outnumbered. The Luftwaffe could barely fly. The navy was destroyed. The supplies had vanished, and the people could not endure another day of battle. The only question left was when the final collapse would strike, and how many more lives would be swallowed before it did. Far from Berlin, in small German towns where the nights had once been peaceful, families huddled around dim candles, listening to the distant thunder of artillery. They had heard rumors that the Allies were close and that the war might end soon, but the fear of soldiers, the fear of punishment, and the fear of chaos kept everyone silent. Some prayed for the Allies to reach them quickly, others prayed for safety or for the Return of loved ones who were still fighting at the front lines, but everyone knew inside that the war was ending because the country itself was losing its breath on the western side. Allied troops advanced relentlessly, pushing through forests and villages that had no strength left to resist. German soldiers surrendered in groups. Some walked toward the Allied lines with hands raised. Others dropped their weapons beside the roads, too tired to keep walking. The commanders could see the same expression. In their faces there was no more loyalty to the cause, there was only exhaustion and a deep longing for the nightmare to stop. On the eastern side, civilians watched the glow of Soviet artillery lighting up the sky night after night. The closer the Red Army came, the deeper the terror grew, because stories of what was happening in the east had spread through every region. People packed what little they had and fled westward in long, endless columns, frozen by fear. Every mile felt like a race against an unstoppable force, every step a desperate attempt to escape the consequences of a war that had finally turned back on its makers. That night, as Berlin shook and burned, German officers looked at each other with empty eyes. They had commanded armies across continents, but now they stood defeated by the weight of their own decisions and the crushing power of their enemies. The maps on the tables meant nothing, the orders meant nothing. The empire they had built through conquest was collapsing in the flames surrounding them. In every corner of the country the same feeling spread, a dark realization that the war they had believed would bring them glory had brought nothing but destruction, hunger, and loss. Families mourned loved ones, soldiers stared silently into the night, and the young wondered what their future could possibly be in a land reduced to ashes. It was not a single moment that told Germany the war was over. It was 1,000 moments unfolding everywhere at once. It was the shaking ground beneath artillery strikes, the silence inside abandoned homes, the hunger in collapsing cities, the exhausted faces of soldiers, and the hopeless glare of officers staring into ruins. Sometime in the late hours of that night, the truth finally settled like a cold shadow across the nation. There would be no last-minute victory, no secret weapon, no miracle. The war was finished, not officially, not signed, but deeply, undeniably finished. The German people felt it in their bones before any document declared it, and the soldiers felt it with every step. They could no longer take. The night Germany realized the war was over was the night the nation accepted its fate, a night filled with fear, sorrow, and the quiet surrender of a people who had given everything and lost everything. A night that would be remembered not for victory or triumph, but for the moment when a once mighty empire faced its final undeniable truth.